In this video, I'm going to react to the top 15 emptiest parts of the USA. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. This is the place where I react to music, media, sports, anime, anything related to popular culture. I'll watch it with an open mind and give you my 100% honest reaction to it. And if you could please hit that like button early, I'd really appreciate it. This is going to be a really interesting one just because America, like the United States of America, from what I've observed, is just way larger than I thought it was in terms of landmass. It's just so much bigger than I thought. Like, I recently learned that the entirety of the UK can fit inside Texas like 3 times. It's just honestly mind-boggling. So when you take that into consideration and then you think about, how big some of the emptiest parts of the US are, I would imagine that there's probably huge swathes of land that are completely or virtually deserted that you could fit European countries like, Spain, Italy, France, Portugal inside them. I imagine like Nevada. Obviously, Las Vegas is based in Nevada, but the Nevada desert is huge, but I don't really know how big it is. But this video here is gonna, I'm sure, because I love this guy, Geography King, honestly, probably one of my favorite channels on YouTube. He's probably gonna do a great job in just showing the biggest, most empty parts of the country. So let's go. This is gonna be me reacting to the top 15 emptiest parts of the USA. Let's do it. All right.
Howdy, it's Kyle with another geography video, this time counting down the 15 emptiest parts of the US, the places in the country where you have large areas with few, if any, people and few, if any, roads. So we're talking about true middle of nowhere. As you may have guessed, all 15 of these are in the western half of the US. There really isn't much true middle.
I didn't think that he would count places with no roads either. I imagine the amount of areas that are really empty but have roads must be quite large, so he wanted to maybe cut down the list a bit more.
Middle of nowhere in the eastern US. Back east, you're never that terribly far from the nearest road or house or some sign of civilization, but I do want to quickly mention a couple of spots back east that are middle of nowhere before I get to this countdown. Northwestern Maine is the most middle of nowhere you're going to find back east. There are very few people that live there and very few roads. Everglades National Park in South Florida is another spot where there are no people.
Wow, just look at this. Look at the trees here. They just look so different. I've never seen trees like this before. Really beautiful in my opinion.
And no roads, just a bunch of swampy land. And northeastern Minnesota, there's a lot of lakes, a lot of open areas, and really not many people or many roads. But those 3 spots are the closest thing you're going to get to true middle of nowhere in the eastern U.S. And if you're thinking that Texas or the southeastern U.S. are country or rural, let's look at it in this perspective. Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming combined have 3 million people, and it's about the same size as Texas and Oklahoma combined.
Wow. So there must be just huge swathes of land, just with very little, if any, people.
Texas and Oklahoma have 32 million people. It's also the same size as Arkansas, Tennessee, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia combined, which have a total population of 30 million. So you put that in perspective, there are so few people that live in the interior West. It's so much more remote, so much more empty and barren, and it's a lot more country and rural than anything you're going to get in the eastern U.S. My personal definition of middle of nowhere is somewhere where you don't have a phone signal, somewhere where you won't hear a train in the distance at all, somewhere where there's no services whatsoever, and also where there are no ranches and farms, just true open wilderness.
Wow.
There's several reasons why these places are true wilderness. They might be very inaccessible with high elevation or perhaps extreme temperatures. The soil might be really bad to where you can't grow any crops or graze animals. There might be no water at all, or for those few spots back east, too much water. But enough of this intro stuff. Let's get to the countdown.
I've just realised that I just saw somewhere where it said the next gas station was 16 miles away. I don't think there is a single area in the UK, maybe even Europe, where the nearest gas station is 16 miles. That is just crazy. Imagine getting stranded there. You'd be in big trouble. Big trouble.
At number 15 is northeastern California. In an area about the size of Rhode Island, there are only about 10,000 people. And most people know California for having the most people of all states with about 40 million, but most of the state's pretty empty, actually. So if you were to put California along the East Coast, the amount of space it takes up on the East Coast, there'd be over 60 million people. So if you think California is really crowded, it really isn't, especially when you consider the fact that 20 million of the people in California live just in the LA area. So California is mostly empty, and the northeastern corner of the state is one of the emptiest parts of the state. At number 14 is northwestern Colorado. This isn't the part of the state that most people think of when they think of Colorado. This isn't where you have the super high mountains with all the ski resorts. This isn't where you have all the 14,000 foot plus mountains. Just kind of high desert, really. There are some beautiful mountains there, but this isn't a very well traveled part of the state. And it's also not a part of the state where many people live. At number 13 is north central Nebraska. And when you think of Nebraska, this probably isn't the part of the state you're thinking of. These are the sandhills. There's no cornfields there, no ranching, and virtually no farms.
Wow, just look at this. Just fields, really. Just endless fields as far as the eye can see. Mental.
With it being sand, you can't really grow any crops or graze animals. There's virtually no water there at all. So it's just a bunch of empty landscape. And the scenery isn't spectacular, but I do think it's very beautiful in a very subtle way. But yeah, north central Nebraska, really empty. At number 12 is southeastern Utah. And for me personally, this is the most beautiful scenery in the entire country. I love all the national parks and national monuments, the canyons, the sandstone formations, the arches, all of it. And with all the parks there, you do have a lot of visitors.
Wow, look at this. Just look at the way, is this sandstone? It just looks like it's been carved almost. This is incredible. I need to get to this place right here.
During the high season, but there are very few people that live there. And even in the busy national parks, all you gotta do is hike a few miles and you're away from all people, away from all civilization. But southeastern Utah, really empty. At number 11 is north central Washington. And of all the places on this countdown, this is the only one that I haven't actually been to. So I'm looking at some of the scenery. It looks really gorgeous. And I'm just basing this on the size of the area and how few people live there. And I was looking at some of the numbers. It's not very well traveled. It's just pretty inaccessible. Not very many roads, very few small towns. I think my next road trip has to include north central Washington. It's beautiful.
I mean, like, because there's few roads, how would you even get to places like this? Would you literally have to kind of drive through, like, you basically need like an off-road vehicle, right? Is that how you get around? Or do you fly in via helicopter or something? Because I can't imagine how else you would get to a place that hasn't got a road. Let me know in the comment section, please.
It's also really empty. Kicking off the top 10 is the Mojave Desert. It's primarily in southeastern California, but there are portions of it in Nevada and Arizona as well. And even though there are 2 interstates that run right through it, it's still mostly empty. There are very few roads, most of which are dirt, and really no towns at all. There are a few spots where there's a cluster of houses you might be able to call a community, but no real towns. You can drive for well over an hour in this area and not pass through anything that's been developed by humans. It's just really open, barren desert. So if you want to see some true emptiness out in the big old desert, check out the Mojave. At number 9 is the Sonoran Desert of southwestern Arizona. And whereas the Mojave Desert is higher elevation, you have a lot more Joshua trees. In the Sonoran Desert, it's much lower elevation. You have
look at those cactus. Or is it cacti? Imagine getting drunk and running through this field at night. Oh my God, the pain, the agony.
A lot more cacti. So a lot of people think of the desert scenery, they're thinking of Sonoran Desert, and it's pretty open. And a lot of it is actually an Air Force bombing range. You're certainly not going to be visiting that, but there are some desert national monuments you can visit, such as Sonoran Desert or Oregon Pipe Cactus. So these are some great spots to visit if you want to see some true low elevation, open, barren desert. At number 8 is west central New Mexico. This is the part of the state that's south of I-40, west of I-25, and north of Silver City. this isn't a terribly inaccessible part of the country. The elevations aren't really high. The temperatures aren't really extreme. It's just there are very few people that live there and very few roads that go through the region. And what also makes it so remote is that there aren't many visitors there either. There are no national parks or national monuments. There are some wilderness areas and national forests, but those aren't big draws for tourists. So West Central New Mexico is one of my favorite parts of the entire country, partly because it is so empty. At number 7 is simply Montana. It's hard to pick a part of the...
Wow, the whole state of Montana. And it's big as well. Like, this is to scale, I imagine. Like, this area looks huge.
State that's really empty because the whole state's pretty empty. It's a huge state with only 1 million people, the vast majority of which live along one of the interstates that goes through the state or near Glacier National Park. And it isn't all mountains either. A lot of folks think that Montana's going to be all high mountains, but there's a lot of
Wow, these wild horses?
high plains and rolling hills in the state. It's all very beautiful, but it is also very empty. But yeah, Montana, not much there, not many people, really beautiful, really empty. And along those same lines, at number 6 is Wyoming. It's not quite as large as Montana, but for an area the size of New York and Pennsylvania combined, there's a total population of 600,000 in the entire state.
Wow.
It's the least populated state in the entire country. And just like Montana, the vast majority of the people that live there live along one of the interstates that goes through the state or in the northwestern corner near the national parks. I mean, you can drive for hours on the back roads through the state and really not go through anything but small little towns. There's really hardly a phone signal through most of the state. It's really remote, really barren, but Wyoming, beautiful state, but also really empty.
That's incredible. 600,000 people in the entire state of Wyoming. Like, London, you know, in terms of its size, is quite a small city relative to, you know, American cities and the other large cities across the world. And we have 8 million people here. I think by last count, it might be 10 million now. But to think that we've got that many more people than the entire state of Wyoming, yeah, Wyoming must be so empty in a lot of spaces, really sparsely populated.
All right, we're about to get real deep as we get into the top 5. At number 5 is southeastern Oregon. For an area about the size of New Hampshire, there's a grand total of about 20,000 people there. Just mostly wide open and very remote. And it's not the most spectacular scenery in the world. It's mostly high desert, but it is very pretty. But it isn't the high elevations that keeps this area from being so, you know, empty. It's the fact that you don't really go through it to get from point A to point B. And without there being spectacular scenery, there's not really a lot of people visiting there. So you don't have a lot of people going through it. You don't really have any small towns. It's just truly remote, really wide open. Southeastern Oregon, the 5th emptiest part of the country. At number 4 is northwestern and west central Utah. This is just some almost like barren wasteland. It's just west and southwest of the Great Salt Lake. We're talking the Great Salt Lake Desert here, just flat, open, barren nothingness. And for an area about the size of New Hampshire, you have about 10,000 people that live there. So extremely remote, very few people. This is an area that not even indigenous groups populate because the land is so bad. There's no water there at all. The ground is just so salty, so you can't grow anything or graze anything there. So it's just empty wasteland, basically. I think it's pretty beautiful myself, but you know, again, northwestern, west central Utah, extremely barren and really empty.
I imagine, is land in these areas super cheap, right? It has to be, considering the demand is so low. I'd love to know, you know, is it somewhere that you could literally just go there and build a house, or would you still have to purchase, say, an acre or 2 acres? Like, let me know in the comment section, please.
At number 3 is central Nevada, and this is a huge area with very few people at all. To put it in perspective, the entire state has 2.8 million people. There are 2 million in the Las Vegas area, 600,000 in the Reno Lake Tahoe area, and 100,000 living along I-80. So you add all that up, that means there's only 100,000 people in the entire rest of the state, an area about the size of either Maine or South Carolina. Think about that. If you live in South Carolina, entire state, only 100,000 people. That's how few people live in central Nevada. It's just super empty. And the fact that it is so empty is why you have some pretty sketchy things going on out there. This is where Area 51 is, and I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but there is obviously some pretty sketchy stuff going on at Area 51, and it's in central Nevada for a reason. You also have some nuclear waste dump sites out there, so central Nevada, truly empty, really barren, but it's also really beautiful. At number 2 is central Idaho, and this area isn't as large as the empty part of central Nevada, But there are a few people in central Nevada. There are nobody in central Idaho. So coming from the Bitterroot Wilderness down to the River of No Return Wilderness into the Salmon River area.
The River of No Return? I need to look into that. That's a pretty spooky sounding name.
There are no people, no small towns, no roads. It's completely inaccessible. And with the exception of some, deep parts of some unexplored caves, there's really nowhere else in the U.S. where you can find parts where no human being has stepped on except for central Idaho. If Bigfoot exists, he's going to be in central Idaho.
There's areas in central Idaho where no human being has stepped foot. That blows my mind, seriously. That literally blows my mind.
There could be all kinds of stuff going on there that we don't know about. It's just so empty, so incredibly remote, also extremely beautiful, but with no people there, it's also extremely empty. And I'm sure it'll be a huge shock to you to learn what the #1 spot is, but of course it's Alaska. It's more than twice the size of Texas with a population of about 700,000, half of which live in just the Anchorage area. The vast majority of the state is really empty and barren. Even native groups didn't really inhabit most of the state. There are very few roads in the entire state, almost all of which are in the southeastern quadrant. You have to take, little bush planes and float planes throughout the state to get from one place to the other. It's just so remote. But yeah, Alaska, obviously the emptiest part of the entire country. And there you have it, the 15 emptiest parts of the U.S. And again, they're all out west. But if you're from back east and you haven't been out to the west, I strongly encourage checking it out. There's nothing like being out in the middle of absolute nowhere, camping out in the open,
I'd love it.
Looking up at the sky and just seeing how dark the night sky can be, just seeing how many stars you can see, seeing what the Milky Way actually looks like. No trains going off in the distance, no cell phone reception. It's wonderful. And if you've seen some of my other videos, I do love big cities. I love visiting the cities. I love doing all the city stuff, but I wouldn't really want to live in a big city. I really love the openness of the interior West. It's wonderful. Remote USA is wonderful USA. I hope you enjoyed this video.
That was awesome. I really, really love reacting to Kyle's videos, Geography King, his videos. Like, the US, it really is, in terms of the geographical makeup, it's just a really cool country. You guys have got so much variety. You've got, the coldness of Alaska, the heat of Nevada and Arizona, the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, the get up and go of New York, and you've got the vast empty spaces of of north central Utah and areas like that. Cannot wait for her to come and do my little road trip early next year. Really looking forward to that. This video was awesome. It's really got me in the mood. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, and keep throwing the recommendations my way. I know I say it all the time, but they genuinely help me out, because if I know you enjoyed watching something, I'll definitely enjoy reacting to it. So like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, keep throwing the recommendations, and I'll catch you in the next one.